parent-child relationships and how those interactions build children's competencies in the social and emotional domains. And I've also been lucky to have the support of the Beckman Institute for my most recent research with infants in brain development. So today I'll be talking about several studies that have been published, as well as new work that is in progress. Okay, so I want to start by just making a point about the significance of the first years of life. And I think 3 areas of research really underscore why the first years are important. I'll talk about these in turn. So first, we know that there is tremendous neuroplasticity during the first years of life and actually across childhood. But during the first year in particular, in this area that's kind of highlighted in pink, we see immense synaptic growth, both in terms of sensory pathways, language, and higher cognitive functioning. And that is a time then where there is lots of room for the influence of environmental factors on the child's brain development. A second area of research has shown that early maternal sensitivity, and by maternal sensitivity, I mean the degree to which the mother or the parent responds sensitively and in a timely fashion to the child's cues. Research has shown how that caregiving experience predicts child's later functioning. And here I am showing 2 competing models. One is a revisionist model, where the idea is that early experience or early caregiving is associated with the child's functioning in early childhood, but that those effects wane with development as later experiences override those early experiences. And in contrast, the enduring effects model shows that early experience continues to have an association with the child's later functioning, although at a slightly lower level than early on. And Chris Fraley and his colleagues, and Chris Fraley is a faculty member here in psychology at the University of Illinois. He and his colleagues have shown, using data from a study of 1,000 children who were followed from birth to age 15, support for the enduring effects model, such that maternal sensitivity during the first 3 years of life predicted later social competence and academic functioning during adolescence, controlling for the child's later parenting experience and also demographic factors. So this research really nicely showed this enduring effect of early experience on the child's later functioning. And then thirdly, research has shown that mental health problems occur across childhood, and that in many cases they begin during early childhood between the ages of 2 and 5. And as you can see in this chart, the proportions of mental health problems that occur in early childhood parallel in some respects, not all respects, but in some respects, the proportions of mental health problems that are seen among older children and youth. So taken together, this research clearly shows that the first years of life hold special significance in terms of brain development, in terms of environmental input, and also in terms of the first emergence of possible mental health problems. So in my research, I'm really interested in understanding this development in the context of the parent-child relationship. And there is a whole slew of research that has shown that a healthy parent-child relationship really contributes, it's not the whole story, but it's a big part of the story of children's ability to develop healthy interpersonal relationships and positive emotional well-being. So in this work, in thinking about parent-child relationships in these early years, I take a perspective I draw on Bowlby's theory of attachment. I take an attachment perspective. And Bowlby was a psychoanalyst who was working in post-war England and being trained in psychoanalysis, but he kind of broke from the psychoanalytic theory of thought and kind of emphasized the role of experience in development and in psychopathology. And this was a break from kind of what the psychoanalysts of his day were emphasizing, which was the internal fantasies and struggles that were the root of psychopathology. So he did really groundbreaking empirical work. And he also joined forces with another researcher, Mary Ainsworth. And together they really paved the way for this field. And it's a very interdisciplinary field that incorporates not only psychoanalysis, but also evolutionary biology, ethology, the work by Konrad Lorenz that's pictured here with the famous imprinting of Gosling's, as well as cognitive development and culture control systems theory in psychology. And also depicted here is Harry Harlow's famous study of rhesus monkeys and their separation from caregivers and how the contact comfort is what they sought rather than feeding or nutrition. So kind of altogether, this theory is about attachment as a biobehavioral safety regulating system. So when non-psychologists talk about attachment, usually it's a very broad concept of maternal warmth or parental warmth and care. But in the context of this theory, in a context of kind of more psychological work by developmental psychologists and social psychologists, the idea is that attachment is this, it's rooted in the central nervous system, and it's talked about as the central organizing system in the brain of higher social mammals. So attachment is actually observed across mammals, and it's highly conserved. And a key, really key idea here is that all infants, except in the most extreme cases, such as institutionalized care without a regular caregiver, all infants will develop an attachment. And that's the most important piece. I'm going to be talking about individual differences and different types of attachment, but more important than that is that infants who are growing up in a normative setting, in that they have a caregiver who is pretty regularly there in their lives, will develop an attachment. And that's key. So I mentioned Mary Ainsworth. She was a pioneer in the study of attachment. So Bowlby was really kind of brought together these interdisciplinary ideas and developed the theory. And then Mary Ainsworth was a great partner. She really set out to test it empirically. And she started her work in Uganda with infants and mothers, and just doing very naturalistic observations and looking at how infants reacted when mothers would, where they would be separated physically in distance, but still kind of, within eyesight of each other. And then she brought her work to the US, and she observed a set of 26 mother and infant dyads in Baltimore, Maryland, very intensely for over the course of the first year of life. She observed each dyad for about 78 hours. So these intensive home observations. But she discovered that in the US, infants were more used to having mothers kind of be out of eyesight. And so what she did at the end of the first year was she brought these mother-infant dyads into the lab and observed them in what's called the strain situation, where she set up a paradigm where the infant was exposed to a stranger and then was left alone in the room. And this elicited the attachment behavioral system that she was interested in, where she was able to observe these different types of attachment patterns that she could link back then to her observations in the home. So I'm going to play this video And I'm going to keep the sound down and I'll kind of talk through it as we go. And so here they are in their observation booth. And this is a typical lab setting where you have a one-way mirror into the room, and the mom and the baby are getting settled. The researcher is there to see that they're okay. Then the baby's always monitored from the observation booth. And in this first part of the paradigm or the situation, the baby and the mom play for a couple of minutes. So we get a sense of how does the baby explore the environment when there's no stress present. And we see this baby is pretty happy and happily exploring, playing with the toys, not clinging, even though it is a strange place. There are lots of individual differences that occur. So after the mom and baby have a couple minutes to play, mom will be seated in the chair, and then you'll see a stranger walk in pretty soon. And the stranger has a very specific protocol she follows, where she sits in the chair, reads a magazine, and then she will talk to the mom for a couple of minutes, and then she'll play with the baby. So here we see the stranger enter. And as you'll see, the baby's very interested in the stranger, kind of checking her out, seeing, who are you and why are you here? And then eventually the stranger will get on the floor to play with the baby again. We're interested to see how is the baby exploring the environment, using the mom maybe as a secure base to explore this new person and these new toys. And then the mom is signaled to leave, usually with a knock on the door. And you'll see the baby goes to the door immediately to see where is mom going. And the baby is upset. And many, not all, but many babies will find this stressful and will be upset. The stranger will try to comfort. And if the stranger can't comfort, the mom will come right back. And what we're really interested in here is how does the baby respond to the mom when she returns? Is the baby comforted by the mother? Meaning the baby's able to calm down after being upset? Does the baby greet the mother? Or does the baby maybe try to manage on his or her own? And so now we have this, they're together again, and then there's a second separation. And here we see again, the baby goes right to the door, or maybe not actually. Baby is upset, and ethically, we do never want to see a baby upset more than 15 to 30 seconds. So the stranger will return right away if the baby is showing prolonged distress, 15 or 30 seconds. Again, the mom returns, and we see the baby still upset, but she's gonna get to mom. Mom picks her up, and we see she's almost immediately calmed down. So that was this strange situation typically lasts 21 minutes. So this was obviously an abbreviated version, but that was showing a pattern of attachment that we would consider secure attachment, meaning the baby is able to use the caregiver as a secure base to explore the environment, but then also as a safe haven when times are rough and when the baby's feeling distressed. And that distress can be either because of external perceived threats, such as a stranger or being left alone, or internal threats, such as feeling ill or tired. But Ainsworth, in her research and many studies since then, have shown that this pattern of secure attachment is predicted by caregiving that the infant has experienced, where the caregiver is responsive to the child's cues and provides comfort when the child's distressed. On average, on the whole, we're going to talk a little bit about how things fluctuate on moment to moment with these sorts of interactions. Another type of pattern is considered insecure avoidance. So where again the child is formed an attachment, and that in some ways is much more important than these different patterns. But an insecure attachment is where the infant manages the stress on his or her own in the strange situation, will not necessarily get upset, but also will not go to the parent during the reunion phases, will kind of manage on their own. And Ainsworth showed that those babies experienced caregiving in the home where the caregiver wasn't always available for support or didn't provide as much support as others. And then a second pattern of insecure attachment is called insecure resistant or ambivalent attachment. Oops, sorry. And these are, these infants have experienced inconsistent caregiving. So in the strange situation, they show heightened distress. They cling to the mother. They have a difficulty calming down during the reunion episodes. And they show somewhat ambivalent behavior where they'll vacillate between clinging and pushing away, showing kind of anger and distress at the same time. And these infants have learned to heighten their arousal, heighten the proximity-seeking behaviors, contact maintenance with the mom, because their experience has been inconsistent in terms of whether they will receive support or not when they're distressed. Again, feel free to stop me or unmute if you have questions or want to comment. So these early patterns of attachment, particularly the kind of contrast between secure and insecure groups as this kind of binary classification, has been related to later child functioning. And in my own work, I have found it predicts more effective coping strategies during toddlerhood, as well as more social and emotional understanding, where we conduct interviews with preschool-age children about their understanding of emotions and people's beliefs and intentions. And we find that children who have experienced a secure attachment have greater social emotional understanding, as well as more positive interactions with peers. They're better able to form positive interactions with new peer partners, as well as they tend to have more harmonious friendships during the preschool and early school years. Other researchers have also shown that children with secure attachment history have fewer externalizing, internalizing problems later in childhood. And then in my own work, and in collaboration with Eva Telzer, who was also a faculty at Beckman, we followed up children that I had collected data on when they were in toddlerhood and preschool. So I started a study called the Children's Social Development Project with 2.5-year-olds, and we followed those children up at age 13 and were able to link their attachment experience or history in toddlerhood to their neural responses using fMRI at age 13. So we're actually in the process of published one paper, but we have other papers in the work looking at other neural tasks. And we are finding that attachment is a predictor of kind of better regulation, neural regulation in the context of stress, risk and reward, as well as in relation to perceptions of trust. So just as a summary, we do have a lot of evidence to support the role of early parent-child relationships in child development. And I think this quote from the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, they had a report come out in July of 2019 on vibrant and healthy kids. And they wrote that the single most important factor in promoting positive psychosocial, emotional, and behavioral well-being in children is having safe, stable, and nurturing relationships with their mother, father, or other primary caregivers. And I do want to emphasize, even though my work that I'm presenting today is focused heavily on mothers, that we also collect data from fathers, and we're also very interested in and aware that children are receiving care outside of the home in childcare settings that are equally supportive and important for their well-being. So now I want to move to this idea of moment-to-moment interactions with caregivers and thinking about, and I'm thinking about these as the building blocks of early development, and not just of behavioral development, but also of brain development, because of that those immense changes and synaptic growth that's happening in that first year of life. So move to kind of switch gears a little bit here. So in the work I've presented up about attachment and maternal sensitivity, the idea is that some parents are more sensitive than others. And I think that what might be more important is that all parents have good moments and bad moments. And it's these moments that where things sometimes don't go well, or infants get distressed, that actually present opportunities for growth and opportunities for development and opportunities for children to learn how to manage stress. And I'm going to show another video clip, and I'm going to let the pioneer of this paradigm, which is called the still face paradigm, that I'm going to show you, narrate this one, so I won't narrate. But I think this paradigm is a really nice way to show how this process of rupture and repair, where there's a disruption in the interaction, and how infants and parents, or infants and their caregivers, can kind of repair these interactions and learn from them. So I'm going to play this clip now.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and reactivity and social interaction that they get from the world around them.
Can you hear that? Okay.
This is something that we started studying 34 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment that the mother did, sits down and she's playing with her baby, who's about a year of age. And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her. This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. Baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions. They turn away. They feel the stress of it. They actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing. It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
Okay.
Good grammar and spelling are important. But if you want to write essays that inspire, messages that forge brighter connections, and emails that get the job.
Sorry about that. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, so in this paradigm, this still face paradigm, it's a really nice demonstration at the very least that the infants as young as 6 to 9 months of age expect certain social contingencies in their interactions with their caregivers. And when those contingencies are violated, or where those expectations are violated, that becomes very stressful. But also, as Adtronic was pointing out, it's the reparation process where the parent and the infant come together to repair those moments of distress can be very important, and also, key to development. So in our research most recently, we're kind of going beyond this idea of maternal sensitivity as like a trait of the parent, where, there's some parents who are more sensitive than others, and really thinking about it more in a more nuanced, kind of more complex way, where, of course, a given parent is not going to be sensitive all the time. And what might really matter for a particular infant is the fluctuations in the parent sensitivity. And so here we have an example of two mothers where their sensitivity is observed over time. This is just kind of hypothetical data. And we see the mean sensitivity of this mother in the green is a little higher than the mother in the blue. But what's really similar about these two is that they kind of go up and down, right? It's not a consistently high or low pattern. They're up and down quite a bit. And so in our work now, we're really aiming to look at these fluctuations and how they relate to the child's behavior, physiology, and even their brain development, although I'll be focusing mostly on behavior today. And so these fluctuations capture what we call within-person variability. And that means we look at how the changes compare not to the other people in the sample, but to the person themselves. They're also very dynamic, and they unfold over time. And this also gives us an opportunity to look at bidirectional associations, meaning changes in mother behavior or parent behavior. How does that relate to changes in the child's behavior? But we're similarly interested in how the child's behavior and changes in the child's behavior can predict changes in the mother's behavior. And this is a graphic that I really like. This was a graduate student of mine created this, the graduate student, I'll talk about her in a minute. There's Neon 3, that's her, but I'll talk about her in a second. But what this graphic shows is just how much variability there is in maternal behavior. And this is maternal support that was coded from a 5-minute task in the lab. Each row of data is for a participant. So we have about 130 rows here in this graphic. And the color coding shows us what the value was for their level of support in a given epoch. So we have, this epoch was the first epoch, and we can see, that the moms here were starting out, different levels of support. But then we can also see that every single mom kind of changed, from low to high and high to low over this 5-minute period where we had 20 epochs, 20 15-second epochs. So lots of variability, lots of change across all the parents. And so Neon 3 looked at these fluctuations in mother mother and toddler behavior during a snack delay task. And we did this with 127 dyads where the child's mean age was 32.7 months. And she was really interested in looking not just at how mother's behavior predicted child's behavior, but also vice versa. And this is another graphic that shows where we can see the mom's support, the change in mom's support over this over time, and how that might lead or show parallel changes in child behavior over time. So you really do see in this graphic, at least, that mother does seem to be leading. Like there's a little bit of mother's high here, and then child goes up, mother goes down, then child goes down, mother goes up, then child goes up, so etc. So there's little lead lag relationship from mother to child. So in this task, she was interested in how children develop self-regulation. And I think many of you have heard of the marshmallow task by famous developmental social psychologist. So we have a modified task here where it says, I'm going to leave you alone with this avocado, and you can either eat it right away or have an underripe avocado, or wait a little while and have a completely rotten avocado. So, well, we didn't do the avocado task, but we did do something similar. We did a snack delay task where we asked the mom to put a snack, this is in the lab, the mom is given a snack basket and instructed to put it in front of her child and tell the child that she has to wait, or he has to wait to open the snack and eat the snack until the mother's done with her paperwork. And the mother, give the mother some paperwork, and for 5 minutes, the child has to sit and kind of wait for the snack while the mom completes her paperwork. And then we signal the mom to begin the snack when the 5 minutes is up. But we were really interested here to see how children and mothers negotiate this challenge. And mother's support was coded in 15-second intervals, and like I showed in that prior diagram. And then we also coded child dysregulation, which was a combination of negative affect and disruptive behavior, where the child would, try to touch the snack, or would try to interrupt the mom's work, things like that. So nothing too severe, but just kind of typical toddler type behavior. And what we found is that in moments when moms showed higher support than their average, so not higher support across all moms, but just higher support than she typically was showing in that task, that those children in the next interval showed a decrease in their their behavior that was dysregulated. So we thought that was really interesting, what we predicted, which was nice, but that these real-time fluctuations were actually having an impact on child behavior in the next moment. And likewise, although it was marginally significant, so we know definitely this is something that we need to be replicated and further investigated, but we did also find that in moments when children showed higher dysregulation than their own average, that mothers actually showed a decrease in support in the next interval, indicating that maybe in those moments when children were actually, showing behavior that was non-typical for them, mothers were perhaps engaging in more discipline than support. So that is one study with older toddler age children. Another graduate student of mine, and I should have mentioned Neontri is no longer a graduate student, she's an assistant professor at Texas Tech University, and Shi Chen, who pictured here, is associate professor at East China Normal University in Shanghai. But she pursued a similar sort of analysis, looking at within-person fluctuations in maternal sensitivity and child functioning. And she was also interested in whether child temperament, and particularly child pleasure, like children who were just showed more pleasure, would moderate these associations. And so this study was conducted with 64 children between the ages of 18 months and 36 months. So these were kind of a wider age range of children. And so in this study, we were again interested in how these within-person fluctuations in maternal behavior predicted child behavior, particularly beyond dysregulation. Chen was looking at attention to task, the child's positive engagement with mother, as well as their positive and negative affect. And then this idea of temperament as a moderator, meaning does this association between maternal sensitivity and child behavior in the moment depend on whether children are typically showing lots of positive affect? And she based this hypothesis that maybe children who didn't show a lot of, weren't high in temperamental pleasure, maybe they actually benefited more from maternal sensitivity, because pleasure and positive emotions have a broaden and build function in development, where children who have more positive affect actually, and this is true for adults too, they might be more likely to explore their environment and build social and emotional resources. So children who are low on temperamental pleasure might need more support in doing those, in building those resources. And we tested this among 66 mother-child dyads, which I mentioned the age range 18 to 39 months. We measured these interactions across, rather than a 5-minute task, we really expanded it, and it was about a 40 to 50-minute procedure in the laboratory in a research environment that actually resembled a home at the Family Resiliency Center on campus, which is a really amazing resource. But we observed these mother-toddler dyads in these different situations in play. We looked at the child-mother dyad in a reunion after a very brief separation. We also asked the mom to have the child help them clean up. They had a snack, they read a picture book together, and then we also had some more challenging tasks, one of which included we gave the child a toy in a locked box, or we gave the child a toy and then we put it in a locked box, and this was a transparent box, and the child was given some keys to open the box, but that proved challenging, so that was a frustration task. So in this study, what Chen found was that the association between maternal sensitivity in a given moment was related to child attention in the same moment. So this is within, these were 60-second intervals. So we didn't do lagged associations, but just concurrent associations. And so when moms were more sensitive than their average in a given moment, children were more attentive to the task at hand. And this was particularly true for children who were low on temperamental pleasure. As you can see, the solid line is for children, it shows this association, and it's non-significant. Children who are high in temperamental pleasure are actually pretty attentive to the task, regardless of what the mom is doing in that moment. But the children who are low in temperamental pleasure have much better attention when their mom has shown an increase in sensitivity. So again, this is within dyads, which is important. So it's in the moments when the mother's more sensitive than their average, the child's more attentive than his or her average. And likewise, we found a similar finding for negative affect, in that in moments when mothers were more sensitive than their average, all children showed a decrease in negative affect in those moments. These were all significant slopes, but that association was particularly strong, or was stronger for children who were low on temperamental pleasure. So this dotted line represents the low temperamental group, whereas children who were high in temperamental pleasure, the association was weaker. So this indicates that these fluctuations in the moment can really have an impact on the child's ability to regulate their emotions and also attend to the task at hand. And we suspect, although we haven't tested it yet, that these types of moment-to-moment interactions will translate into developmental outcomes later on in terms of the broader types of things we were talking about earlier in terms of peer relationships, behavior problems, and academic performance. So just to sum up here, this is just indicates that parenting is a dynamic process, and that the child's temperament also plays a role, that children are not coming to these interactions and these relationships as blank slates, so to speak. They really have temperaments that they're shaped in the context of these interactions, and those temperaments also shape the interactions themselves. So one last project I want to talk about, and this one is very much in progress, is our most recent study called the Infant Development Project, which is in collaboration with Doctors Brad Sutton and Ryan Larson at Beckman, as well as collaborators at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. And my two wonderful current graduate students here, Xiaomei Li and Yanan Hu, who have been assisting with many parts of the study. But this study was focused on looking at how these early mother-infant interactions, these moment-to-moment, changes, are related to the infant's brain development at the end of the first year of life. And we did fMRI scans with infants during natural sleep, so no sedation, and it was all safe, and it was very challenging, but very much worth it. And so I'm going to present some very preliminary findings from this study. And in the study, we used the still face paradigm that I showed you earlier. And we did that paradigm with babies when they were 3, 6, and 9 months. And then at a very micro level, we coded both the mom and the baby's facial expressions, vocalizations, and directions of gaze. And from those microanalytic coding, we could calculate engagement states for the diet, different for the baby and the mom separately. And then what we're doing now, and there are lots of different ways to analyze this very rich data, but we're interested in the dynamics of the interaction. And what we're showing here is that on the bottom here, we have the baby's engagement phases. So this is when the baby's active or monitoring or negative, or is kind of focusing on the object, or is positively focused on the mom. And here we have slightly different engagement phases for the mom, where she's neutral, or also object focus positive, mom's positively focused on the infant. And what we're seeing here is across this a 2-minute play session, the degree to which the dyads move across this state space, where the baby is kind of active and the mom is kind of monitoring but not vocalizing. So each of these squares represents a different state of the dyad based on a combination of what the infant is doing, what the mom is doing. And what we can take away from this is the degree to which the dyad is flexible in their interactions and moves around this space. So we can measure what we are calling dyadic flexibility. And this is the structural variation in the dyad's moment-to-moment affective exchange. And it captures both the behavioral affective content as well as the temporal flow of the interaction. So it's a really nice dynamic measure. And we see here, what we're seeing here is 3 dyads. Oops, sorry. Oh, shoot. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, apologize. So we see here 3 dyads, one is blue, one is green, one is orange. So we see that there are, different levels of flexibility where the blue dyad has, is covering more of the space and showing higher levels of flexibility. So we took those measures of flexibility and we're just doing some initial analyses with some neural data that we've collected at 12 months, where we're looking at functional connectivity during a resting state scan of large-scale brain networks. And so we have found that dyads who show more flexibility at 6 months during the play episode of the still phase are also showing higher levels of connectivity, and higher levels indicates greater maturity of the brain network. In the default mode network, which is a network that is kind of focused internally and is what is most active at rest and is kind of focused on self sort of understanding in a very broad sense. Of course, with babies, it's a little different. But a similar association was found with what is called the salience network that is seated in the interior insula. And that also shows that these dyads that show more dyadic flexibility are showing more connectivity in that network as well. And then lastly, we see with a different measure from these data of during the still phase, the rate at which dyads are repairing is also shows the same positive association with the default mode network connectivity measure. So to wrap up, I just want to emphasize the significance of the early years and the degree to which the brain is developing is, kind of amazing. And I think it is an important period of life in which those moment-to-moment interactions can literally really be building blocks for the development of the brain and the central nervous system, which then kind of become established over time in terms of behavioral patterns that the child develops. And this is generally important, I think, in terms of understanding these experiences that, children are taking away or from their interactions with caregivers. What we need to do, hopefully what this will inform, is the importance of supporting parents, in terms of work-family balance and providing families time, whether it's parental leave or, work arrangements that allow for parents to be available for their children and to kind of keep family in the forefront. Also, we also, like I mentioned briefly before, caregivers in other contexts are equally important, and our ability to support, resources for childcare providers and training and to provide families with high quality childcare is super important, because again, these early years are the building blocks and provide a foundation that isn't deterministic in the sense that, it's going to predict everything, but it is, I think, a foundation that will have long-term consequences and that lead to kind of that feedback so that the, children who start out and have these healthy experiences can keep building on them. So we want to provide all children with those possibilities. So thank you very much for listening on an evening in the middle of the semester. We appreciate your attention. And I also just want to say thank you. We're very grateful to the families who participated in our research, as well as the many graduate and undergraduate students who've assisted. I'm going to stop there and I will stop sharing.
Well, thank you very much for presenting your work with us. We did have a couple questions that popped up in the chat So I wanted to read some of those out for you. I guess one that was more like direct, like how things work is, how do you actually, for some of those work, it's at the end there, I think you said you were doing different neuronal segments, and how do you actually scan infants' brains? How does that process work?
Yeah, it's challenging. So, I mean, the babies come in, we schedule the scans at nighttime if we can, or during the baby's nap time. And then we have the baby the mom rocks the baby to sleep in the scan room. We have it all set up. It's dark, it's quiet. And then during natural sleep, we have the babies, we use the 64 coil, head coil, 64 channel head coil. And we have a definitely a kind of a baby holder. Ryan Larson made this custom made, I don't know what to call it, holder with the baby's kind of positioned in that holder. So it keeps the baby still. And then we have all sorts of ear protection, 3 layers of ear protection. And then we also have research assistants who are staying in the scan room with the baby to monitor the baby in case the baby wakes up. Oh, and we play sound overhead to kind of lots of white noise to keep the scan noise from waking the baby up. Is that kind of what you were getting, where you were asking? Or
Yeah,
is that helpful?
Yeah, I think that sounds like what I was expecting. That sounds very interesting. I've seen some of the baby holders for like x-rays, for medical x-rays, and some of those setups. So it sounds like it's something similar to that, but yeah. There was another question here asking about so I guess I'm just going to read it because it's, so in terms of attachment, you discuss how parents responding to cues from the child are important. Without having children, this may be uninformed, but how does the idea of teaching young children to cope themselves by letting them work through their feelings when upset instead of running to them influence or change the data?
Yeah. I'm sorry, is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it depends, a lot on the on the child's age, for sure. So research with infants has shown the more that and this is like 3 months of age, the more the more you comfort the baby, the less they'll cry later on. So that there is, so it's counterintuitive of the, like, well, you're just kind of reinforcing the crying. So you're not reinforcing the crying if you respond. I think, but of course it changes as children get older. You want to give them strategies. And I think with older, with toddlers, preschoolers, when emotions do run high, you, rather than trying to fix it right away, giving them space, giving them words, I think being able to verbalize and helping them verbalize how they're feeling is a neat strategy. So the strategies will change with time. And I don't know if that answers the question, but I'm happy to answer the follow-up.
I think so. I guess another question that I had, just again on logistics and stuff, how do you go about quantifying behaviors like that? Like you said, or like quantifying maternal sensitivity. How does that process work?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's definitely labor intensive. So we have really very specific, detailed coding manuals where we outline the concrete behaviors we'd be looking for. And then it's usually on a rating scale from like 0 to 4 or 0 to 3. So the types of behaviors we would look for in a 15-second interval would be if the child is verbalizing to the mom, is the parent responding, is the parent coordinating their interactions with the babies in terms of verbal or nonverbal cues. So there's a lot of kind of detailed discussion that happens. And then we train our coders. That takes sometimes a semester to train the coders to be reliable. And then we obviously are checking for intercoder reliability all along the way.
Yeah, that seemed like a very interesting. So is that standardized in your lab, or is those manuals that you said, are those standardized in like the field?
Yeah, there are certain coding systems that, like Ainsworth's coding system is one that people use. I use that one. So it's pretty standardized.
And then there were some other comments. I think this was relating to the experiment where the mother left the room and then came back, and this was, I guess, more of a, there's talking about local Facebook groups that report lost and found pets, and they were interested to see how animals relate to finding, being reunited with their families.
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Having 2 dogs and a cat like walking around here while I was talking. That's a really good question because, like I said, mammals do form attachments. So I don't know offhand of research specifically between kind of animal-human attachments, although there's been interest at NIH to do that work, and that, but I'm not up on that. I know that pets have positive, definitely benefits for children in terms of social emotional development. But that's a great question. Sorry, I don't really have a good answer.
Yeah, another one was, I think, just pointing out with your work, like the variance of a mother's maternal support, like internally, and I think that's what you were getting at, was very important to the response of the kids. So yeah.
Yes, right. So I think that was, it doesn't matter. I mean, that work is suggesting it doesn't really matter how responsive you are overall compared to other people. What matters for your child is how responsive you are compared to yourself. The child has
yeah, so like how, based on their level that they're used to, they're like
exactly
their own set point or something like that.
Right.
Cool. I think that's all of the questions that I've seen in the chat so far. If anyone else has any others, but feel free to either put it in the chat or unmute yourself and ask. But if nothing else, thank you so much for joining and presenting your work with us. It was super interesting and informative.
Yeah. Well, thank you for inviting me again. Thank you for everyone for being here.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Have a good night.
Yeah, have a good night.